On this day, the birds were soaring high. It was a clear sign that it would not rain today. And where would it come from? If the sky from horizon to horizon was so bright and dazzlingly blue that one wanted to jump off the ground and fly with the birds there far into the sky, escaping from reality, worries, and everything else that this earthly world has to offer. And you don't want to think about anything. You just want to feel, absorb the beauty like a sponge, and realize that everything that people have worked and thought about for so long is actually so simple. However, there are no words to explain it. So one can only silently enjoy it and tell oneself that it is bliss. These were the thoughts that ran through Susan's mind as she lounged contentedly on the chaise lounge, basking in the hot July sun. It was her third day at her sister Carolyn's country estate, where she had been invited after hearing about her unsuccessful vacation in the Maldives. Susan's husband, who had the audacity to ruin his wife's vacation, had been sent to work in a red-hot office. Susan, determined to have a real vacation this summer, enjoyed the company of her sister and son Brian. Fortunately, the weather was perfect. It seemed that all the seasonal rains had poured out in May, and now July rejoiced with warmth and sunshine. In the town where Carolyn had a nice and cozy cottage, there was no crowding. Everyone was eager to get out of this stuffy, humid metropolis and back to nature. Susan shuddered to think what it would be like to travel by train. Thank goodness she had a car and air conditioning, or she might not have lived to see this wonderful event. A large crowd of people had gathered on the beach by the river. Everyone was trying to get their share of water and sunshine. It was like an anthill on the beach. All in all, the vacation season was in full swing. Susan, who had managed to walk and swim in the previous few days, decided to have a day of passive rest today, sitting in the sun and reading a book by her favorite author, and so comfortably ensconced in a chaise lounge. She has been exposing her body to the soothing rays of the summer sun for many hours, and despite her 38 years, her physique still remained in excellent condition. Apparently, regular swimming lessons and visits to the gym had had an effect. Men on the street circled around her as they did 20 years ago. Age only added to her attractiveness, which is inherent only in mature ladies who are wise in life experience and understand its value. In any case, Susan was not lacking in male attention, even though she tried not to take advantage of it. Within minutes, there were inarticulate remarks with a disgruntled tone. Carolyn approached the porch with a sad grimace on her face. Those bastards. She spat furiously at her feet. I should have accidentally annoyed those horrible ladies in my department. Now I'll have to go to work. And I'll be the only one in the department for how long? Susan asked regretfully. Who knows? As it turns out, it could be for a few days or a month. I don't know exactly. Yes, that's very unfortunate. Look after the house and my baby until I can assess the situation. I'll call you later when I have more clarity. Good, Susan said with a nod. Come soon. As long as the weather is nice. I'll be waiting. Give me a call. I'm always in touch. Carolyn was not satisfied and went to change her clothes. She did not return the unwanted bags, but threw them in the back seat, and after saying goodbye to her son, Susan disappeared in a cloud of road dust kicked up by the car after saying goodbye to her sister. Susan headed home. Brian, when are you going to have dinner? She asked her nephew through the window. It's early, and Susan. About 3 o'clock, I guess, he said. Very good, she thought. Then I'll go and sunbathe a little longer. There's plenty of time yet. After changing into a nice new swimsuit, Susan headed to her favorite spot and grabbed a bottle of Sprite from the refrigerator. Brian greeted his aunt in her new swimsuit with genuine delight. He had long admired her. She had been the centerpiece of his male fantasies. And now seeing her in 2 thin strips of lingering and covered with an even layer of tan, he was amazed at her beauty. He was in his 20s and had not yet had a girlfriend, but he paid special attention to ladies much older than himself, not to his classmates who will be considered a trap if but stupid. He was attracted to mature beauty and experience, and he was willing to offer anything to be in bed with one of them. And Susan was the limit of his dreams. Thousands of times in his dreams he had entertained her, and just the thought of her made his friend erupt. Susan had long ago watched curiously as the boy was aroused by her mere presence and now warmed by the blazing sun and wanting to surprise her nephew. She decided to play with him a little, making herself comfortable so he could see her. She assumed a relaxed pose, and to tease him, gently ran her fingers over his thighs and belly, letting out a sigh so long that Brian's hand reflexively grabbed at his swim trunks. Susan noticed this out of the corner of her eye, stood up, walked past him onto the veranda with the grace of a photo model, and began rummaging through her purse. "Could you put some sunscreen on my back? I'm a little uncomfortable with the sun," she innocently inquired. "If you don't mind," she said with a charming smirk on her face. The young man gasped at the thought. He was always looking for an opportunity to touch the object of his desire. And here she was, practically naked, standing in front of him and giving him that opportunity. "Of course," Brian said, his voice hoarse with impatience. "I'll do whatever you wish." "Thank you, sweet boy." Susan smiled at him. "Take the cream and apply it evenly to her back from her shoulders all the way down." Susan lay on her back, and the boys squeezed out some cream with trembling hands and began to massage her shoulders. Satisfied that she was overwhelmed with pleasure, his hands massaged her neck, shoulders, and back. Brian caressed her silky tan skin, imagining himself with her in his arms. His aunt's words interrupted his beautiful thoughts. "Brian, is your bra strap bothering you? Maybe I should take it off to make you more comfortable." Susan lay in front of him in just her panties, free of her bra straps. Even though she was lying on her stomach, Brian could see her stunning figure and was amazed. Susan lay under his arms as if nothing had happened and purred softly in a feline way that delighted and puzzled him. The boy's hands gently massaged her back, and he gradually lowered himself down. When he reached her waist, he hesitated, not knowing if he could go any further. Susan's words, however, dispelled his doubts. "Brian, why have you stopped? Keep going. I liked the way you're doing it." His hands began to stroke Susan's firm buttocks. As he stroked them, he realized he couldn't go on. He felt a hot wave sweep over him, and his mind refused to listen. Brian, losing his mind, placed his bulging bump on his aunt's leg to ease the excruciating pain in his groin. This was the final straw that broke the fragile cup of balance, and he shot up furiously. Susan noticed the sticky burning stain on his leg and turned around. Brian wanted to run, not knowing where to hide from the embarrassment. But his aunt grabbed his arm tightly. "Darling, why did you put up with this for so long? I could have made things so much nicer." Susan rose from the chaise and drew the young man to her. He didn't know what to say. His legs were shaking. His eyes were staring at the floor, and his swim trunks were stained. Susan sat him down and furiously beside her, wrapped her arms around his shoulders. And before he realized it, had stripped him of his clothes. "Don't be ashamed. I understand. I noticed the way you look at me." Susan stroked the boy's hair affectionately. "Yes, and I really liked you too. So why don't we make each other feel good?" He listened to his aunt and couldn't believe this wasn't a dream. At that moment, she slipped her fingers and just right. Brian sat there, afraid to move, unable to believe this was happening in real life. His wildest fantasies were becoming reality. His aunt stood in front of him, very beautiful. He was dizzy and afraid to breathe for fear of scaring away the euphoria that had suddenly come over him. His fingers clutched frantically at the edge of the chaise lounge, and only his lips made delightful sounds that he could not suppress. Susan, meanwhile, was having fun with her friend. "Now it's your turn to give me pleasure," remarked Auntie. She took him by the hand and led him into the house where it all happened. The nephew had given his aunt pleasure more than once before. Brian stated this while lying on the bed. "Oh, Auntie, you're just great. You're a good girl," Susan said, glowing. Susan awoke to a strong buzzing sound above her ear. Slowly opening her eyes, she discovered the source of the problem. Her phone was vibrating. Brian was sleeping peacefully beside her, tired from the day. "How much did we run into last night?" Susan grinned and tried to remember. She had never thought that one person, especially one so young, could run that many times in a day. She went out on the balcony with the phone and pressed the answer button. "Hello, sister. Everything went well as promised. He turned out to be a giant. So I have to give you a present. Don't worry. I'd rather do it than some stupid girl at the bar. I think you'll be tired by the day after tomorrow. But you won't mind if I borrow him from time to time. I didn't have that when I was young. So I want to have some fun in my old age. Well, goodbye, sister. We're waiting for you. Carolyn returned 2 days later, greeted by a very happy son who had spent a few magical days with his aunt. For the next few days after Mom returned, I awkwardly avoided being alone with Aunt Susan for fear that Mom would pick up on my intense tension. I didn't know what they had agreed between them, but if she suspected anything about our dating in her absence, she didn't let on. And Susan didn't seem to give any sign either, apart from a lingering glance or a sly smile when Mom wasn't looking. Those secret glances evoked complex feelings of excitement and joy, no matter how hard I tried to shift my attention to something else. My thoughts kept returning to the intoxicating passion that Aunt Susan and I shared soon, and Susan found an excuse to leave me alone in the garage again while Mom was busy. No sooner had she closed the garage door than she was on top of me. My half-hearted protests subsided as we began fiercely rummaging through each other's clothes. I felt a familiar mixture of euphoria and guilt in the aftertaste. Aunt Susan stroked the hickey she'd left on my neck. "Our little secret," she whispered with a smirk. I knew it wouldn't be the last time I was unable to resist my aunt's confidence. Adduction, the lies and secrecy kept me on my toes, but at the same time made me addicted to the next time I would see my aunt.